My name is JP Lane, and I decided at pretty young age, honestly, that I was going to serve the United States military. A lot of us remember in 2001 the Twin Towers being hit on 9/11, and I'll never forget that day. My teacher left the room and came back with a TV, a box TV on wheels, and normally we expected a movie at that time, but it was crazy because she turns on the news and we see the Twin Towers fall. And it was at that moment she was telling our class that we're under attack. And I didn't exactly know what was going on per se, but I knew in that moment that I wanted to serve in the military and fight and be a part of that never happening again. Fast forward a few years, I was reminded of that promise that I made myself of serving my nation. And so I go to the Army recruiter's office and I was blunt up front. I was like, what's the most dangerous job you can give me right now? They said a 12 Bravo combat engineer. You'll make bombs, blow stuff up, search for bombs. It's going to be dangerous, but you'll have a blast, kid. And so I was like, yep, that's for me. I signed the dotted line in 2008. And shortly after, in 2010, I deployed to Afghanistan, where I would be doing what's called route clearance. And it's one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. I'd be searching for bombs and clearing the roads so that everybody else could go safely on their mission. I'm the type of person that enjoys a challenge. So when someone tells me I'm not able to accomplish something or do something, I give it 200% instead of 100%. So I get off the bus and I arrive at this new location. We were told to keep our heads in our laps, so we didn't know where we were going from the airport. Ultimately meaning we didn't know how to get out of there either. We get off the bus and right away they have a line of drill sergeants just chewing us out. And it's pretty much a shark attack at that moment. We all line up. They throw our bags down on the ground and immediately we start doing push-ups, sit-ups, you name it. The cool thing was I was already competitive, so it wasn't anything that I knew I couldn't accomplish. The real question was, who am I going to help along the way and encourage along the way? And so I would challenge my battle buddies like, hey, we got this. Keep running, keep pushing. Don't give up. The training was definitely a stepping stone for preparing me for my deployment. It allows us to operate and realize that we need to work together as a team to accomplish the mission. It's not about one person. Because if one person messes up, guess what? We all mess up. We all got to be punished and drop and do push-ups, runs, whatever. So it taught us, hey, whether you're back here in the States or you're in a war zone, we operate as a team so we can get the mission accomplished. So some people might have heard of sandstorms, and that is definitely the case in Afghanistan. There are sandstorms, and I'll never forget the day that our plane landed and dropped us off our first day in theater. There was a sandstorm that as soon as the back door of the plane went down, it literally punched us in the face. And I was like, oh, yeah, we're in it now. We went over to where we needed to check in, make sure everybody's good to go. And then we went to our tents to wait for the next few days because every unit that comes in gets pretty much established. So, hey, where are you going and what are you doing? And during that time, it's actually kind of semi-chill, if you will. It was hilarious. It's kind of like a very rundown version of college, if you will, because we're all living in tents. So it was just funny, trading off the things like, hey, do you need this laptop or do you need this stand or light or whatever, just random stuff. So it was kind of funny for the first few days doing that whole swap of items, but then they would show us around the base, get us familiar with where we're at and what's going on, and then our vehicles, and then we started everyday missions. So I would be doing route clearance, so I would be in vehicles driving around and searching for bombs all day. that they would bury in the roads and clearing those so that the rest of the civilians and the other soldiers doing their missions could go safely. So we would do that every single day. We would wake up 0 dark 30 and get in our trucks, have our snacks and our weapons and different things on us, and we would drive out and clear routes all day long. There's a lot of training involved when it comes to searching for IEDs. But one of the biggest signs, honestly, which was pretty easy, was the fact that there was no longer people in the vicinity. If there's no personnel walking around where there's normally personnel walking around, ding, that's one red flag right there. And so that's what we did every single day. We would just be on guard and paying attention, using our tech, using our eyes, using the surroundings, what's going on. And that's how we would find IEDs constantly. That's the risk of being a combat engineer. We're the first ones out and typically the last ones back. The reason why is because we go out and nobody travels and moves unless we clear the route and make sure there's no bomb threat, no IED threat. So you're always at risk for all sorts of other things happening. It seemed like we're finding them almost every other day. We found over 100, I want to say 110 is the number that I believe. And my unit, the 863rd Engineer Battalion, tied with my unit, my company, the 428, we were announced the best combat engineer unit in the entire United States Army that year when we came back home. There was, when I was told that, there was a little bit of like joy in that because we worked very hard and we did a lot of good things. It was just awesome knowing that there's a lot of people coming back home safe, and that's what it's about. One moment that always sticks out that breaks my heart is a IED blast that was so big, it blew up the truck in front of my truck. And it was so strong. Mind you, these are not Humvees. These are not tiny vehicles. These are RG-31s that are humongous up-armored vehicles. And the IED that they hit was an 800-pound IED. And the truck went up into the air and flipped upside down and landed on the turret. And now instead of the truck, we're in a convoy going one direction. The truck no longer faced its normal direction. It was upside down facing my truck. And I was in the turret up behind my 50 cal at the time. And I look over at the truck when the dust settled, and I've never seen anything so crazy like that, that was able to impact a vehicle of that caliber. And I'll never forget how angry I was thinking that everybody inside that truck had died. Thank God nobody did, actually. Out of the 3 soldiers that were in that vehicle, my friend Dan, who was in the passenger seat, which is called the truck commander's seat, he ended up being paralyzed from the chest down. Everybody else, I believe, was fine from that specific blast in the moment. So, but I'll never forget, that was devastating to see. And people tend to not realize that war's not exactly the movies that we watch. It's your buddies, it's your friends and family, and those you're closest to, you've served for years with. It's not just a movie scene where you don't know the actor's name or you don't know who the extra is in that scene. No, these are guys you've served with for a long time, and you want everybody to go home safe. So when these things happen, it's pretty devastating. The thing that I had, thankfully, going to combat was my faith in God and my understanding that there are things that are outside of our control that do end up happening, but I knew where I was going if anything bad happened to me. And after missions like that, that's when I would go and speak with the chaplain that we have that always comes with us to the theater to combat. And I would go talk to my chaplain a lot. Let's just say that. So I was very grateful for those conversations, and he helped keep me level-headed and remind me, hey, we're here for a short period of time, about a year, and we're going to head back home. Everything's going to be all right. Little did he know my year would be cut short because I was hit by a 200-pound IED that ended up taking me back home sooner. And I'll never forget, he was actually searching for me and asking, like, hey, anybody seen Lane? Anybody seen Lane? And he was told by my command that I was blown up. And that was hard for him to hear as well. So the day I was blown up was actually supposed to be my day off. I chuckle because, like I said, I'm very competitive. I'm always wanting to serve and be a part of what's going on, the mission and everything at hand. And so it was my day off. I was laying in the tent, and my platoon leader comes into the tent and wakes everybody up, says, hey, I need some volunteers. We have a special mission, and who wants to head on out? So I volunteered. I grabbed my stuff that I normally take on mission, and I get in my RG-31 and I'm up behind the 50 cal. And I realized that this wasn't something type of mission that we normally would do, because normally when we cover routes, we do them one route just one time, and then we move on to the next route and we clear that one, and we continue that process until we're done with the list of routes, and then we go back home to the base. And this day they asked us to clear the most dangerous route, not once, but twice. Once in the morning, then we had a few more routes, and then one second and final time in the afternoon before we headed back to the base. So it was different, but I was like, okay, we'll be back in no time, and mid-afternoon we'll be good to go. So we headed out early in the morning, and almost immediately on the first route, the truck in front of me again gets blown up, hit by an IED. We had to swap out the vehicle, the crew, and get another a hauler to come pick up the destroyed vehicle. So as all of this exchange was going on, my driver ends up miking up and saying, hey, Lane, you mind if we switch spots? I want to spend time behind the 50. And I was like, yeah, that's fine, dude. So I get down from the turret, he gets up behind my 50, and I sit in the driver's seat where he was, and we continue on mission. And from that incident, we had to keep moving forward because we still have routes to clear. So we continued moving forward, clearing the other routes on our list, but that gave the enemy enough time to use that same hole from the first blast to place a bigger, stronger IED in there. They buried it, covered it, made it look like vehicles were driving over it while we were gone. And the guy with the detonator waited behind a tree, ready for any unit to return. Little did he know it would be ours. So we finished the other routes on the list, and we come back to the most dangerous route in that entire area to clear it one second and final time. And as the vehicles were slowly driving over it, the guy with the detonator chose my vehicle. He pressed the button, and a 200-pound bomb blew up, penetrating my RG-31, actually being the first IED to penetrate a truck like that in history. And in that moment, it threw my truck up into the air, slammed it down on the passenger side, causing my truck commander in the passenger seat to break his leg. But little did I know the blast went straight through underneath where I was seated, and I had no idea what had happened to me. But in that moment, both of my legs were amputated, my left femur snapped in half, my pelvis snapped in half, and my spine dislocated from my pelvis. My right arm snapped in half 90 degrees. My right middle finger was amputated, but nobody needs that finger anyway, so it's all great. My forefront teeth were knocked out when my face hit the steering wheel, and everything inside my torso was destroyed except for my heart and my left lung. There was flying pieces of metal called shrapnel, literally penetrating my body and cutting me up all over. And I'll never forget when that happened, because my body had snapped in half and I was wearing body armor. I was actually laying on my truck commander in the passenger seat, suffocating him and bleeding out onto literally his face. And he was like, "Lane, I can't breathe. Get off me, get off me." And so I had to use my broken right arm and my left arm and push and pull myself off of him so that I could not suffocate him and take him out. And in that moment when I was holding myself up, I looked down at my legs and I didn't know that I was amputated because I was still wearing my uniform, but my uniform was bloody all the way down. So I knew I was pretty messed up. And shortly after, I had literally passed out from blood loss. And in that moment, one of my battle buddies had climbed up to the top of the truck and was able to reach in because my door was blown off. They were able to reach in and pull me out, get me down on the ground. The medic was there in a split second, put tourniquets on my legs, on my arm, got everything stinted up and taken care of. They put me on the stretcher when the bird landed 8 minutes later and hauled me out of there to get care. I stayed in Afghanistan for a little bit in Kandahar. Then they moved me out to Germany where I would follow up with procedures and surgeries. Normally in a situation like this, the soldier is back home within 72 hours getting the best care they can. But my body was having such a hard time staying alive and staying stable for the trip that it took them almost 2 weeks to get me back to the United States. It was just very difficult for my parents to wonder what's going on with their son and they're not able to be there. It was already a difficult time anyways because my stepmom had literally just gotten home from being announced free of cancer. She had lymphoma, and the same day she was home from being no longer having cancer was the same exact day that my dad gets a phone call that I was blown up and on my deathbed. So it was just really difficult for them to handle what was going on. So by the time they were able to get me stable enough to make that trip back to the United States, my dad had met me. I was still in a coma. I was actually in a coma for a month and a half. But the day I landed, he met me at the hospital in Walter Reed. And from that point on, he was there by my side, telling the doctors, "Hey, can we keep his arm?" They wanted to amputate because it was so badly damaged, but he was like, "Please save it. Whatever you have to do, please save his arm." And it got to a point where it was very difficult for my dad, but he said, "If the Lord is calling me home, then don't try to fight it and stick around just for them." And he said that while I was in the coma. And I'm not sure how long after he said that, but when I woke up, it was definitely going to be a new story for me. When I woke up, I was so much in a daze from the medications and the painkillers and all of that stuff. And I couldn't talk for a little while. I had a tracheotomy where they put a tube down my throat. And so that was still in effect. So I really didn't say anything initially, but when I was finally able to speak, and for the first time after waking up from my coma, I looked at my dad and I was just like, well, this is different. I knew that I was an amputee. I lost my legs. Those weren't going to grow back. I knew that I was in a lot of pain from everything that I had experienced, all the damage internally that they had to catch me up and tell me what happened. But honestly, it was just a moment of, this is painful, this is difficult, and I don't even know what's going to happen from here on out. But I know that with God's help, I can get through this, and it doesn't matter how painful it's going to be, I'm going to get through. Of course, when bad things happen, our first, whether we believe in God or not, our first response tends to be, why me, God? And which is ironic, because when bad things happen to us and that's our first question, his first question, if he could probably ask us one, is, did I do that to you? Because that's literally what I heard in my head shortly after. I literally had so much doubt. I had so much hate. I had so much pain that was unbearable. One thing that people don't know unless they have read my book or asked personally, but I was married during that time. And when I woke up from my coma shortly after, she wasn't able to handle the situation, and I was not willing to deal with what she had done during that time. And the medications had me super upset all the time too. So we ended up separating and going our own ways. And that just created more depression and those negative thoughts rolling into my mind. One of them being, well, you're in this situation. No one's going to love you like this anyway, so you might as well just end it. And I had gone up and down mentally to the point where there were 12 different moments within about a year time frame where I had almost taken my life. And it was extremely difficult to want to keep pushing through. And every single time I was ready to end it, I heard this voice say, not yet. It's not your time. And that year went by, and I started healing more. I started mentally understanding that, you know what? We live in a fallen world where bad things happen all the time. And who am I to say this was God's fault when I'm the one who signed the dotted line? I'm the one who asked to be in that specific job, that the most dangerous job in the military. I'm the one who went on that deployment. Like there's so many things that it all points back to me. And yes, the enemy was the one who made the bomb and blew me up, but that's because we live on a fallen world. There's always evil doing bad things. That's obvious. But how did I overcome all of those things? Well, that's where he reminded me that he's been here the whole time. And that healing process for me mentally just started to impact my thoughts of, you know what, I don't need to end my life. In fact, whatever negative thing comes my way from this point forward, I'm going to overcome it and move forward and tell it, nice try. Something that I would like to talk about real quick, because I always want to give honor where honor's due. While we were in Afghanistan doing our missions, my best friend, Justin Ross, was shot and killed by a sniper. And I will never forget that day. After everything, the entire company had formed in a formation back on the base, and we were all in tears. And I'm sure in every single soldier's mind, the question was, how did this happen? Was rolling through a million times over. How could we let this happen? You name it. Every just negative question was rolling through our minds. And that was the day, honestly, that started to change who I was internally. I was a very happy-go-lucky person, just enjoying life, wanted to teach others how to fight, jiu-jitsu, wanted to teach others how to better equip their rifles, so on and so forth. Just be the best soldier I could for myself and those around me, always with a smile on my face, the best I could. But that moment right there changed who I was, and I was only filled with hate and anger. I didn't care about, and I've been honest with a lot of people, thousands of people on this, I no longer cared about searching for IEDs. All I wanted to do was hunt. And that is never a mindset that anybody should have, for one. No matter what their MOS is, they shouldn't be hunting with anger. We're there to do a job, and we're professionals. And if the situation calls where we need to do what we need to, then that's what happens. But you should never do it through anger. It's not the right mindset to be in. And I knew that I was in that situation with that mindset. I was going to come home being somebody that nobody wanted to be around. That was March 26, 2011. And so every mission following led up to just anger and hate. And the person I really didn't want to come back to my home being. And personally, I think God knew that, and he didn't want me to come back that way either. And so this situation followed. July 2nd was when I was blown up. My third and final time, which I wasn't blown up 3 times in one day. I was blown up 3 different times throughout my 10-month deployment that I was there. And that third one, July 2nd, was the one that took me home. Personally, I'm thankful that I was blown up, because it took out the mindset that now I didn't have to focus on anger and frustration. I had to focus on healing, getting better, trying to get back on my feet on prosthetics and learn how to walk and just get back to living a semi-normal life again. And that's why I tell people I'm grateful that I was blown up, because I came back a different person, but a person that had a different mindset too, so that I could end up becoming someone that was happy with life again. Coming back home was also very different for me, because it wasn't just a soldier who wasn't injured or anything coming back from a combat zone to their house and going back into semi-normal life. It was, I had to start over from scratch, everything. I didn't have anything. I didn't even come back with half of my stuff from Afghanistan. Some of it was shipped in boxes to my parents' house, but I started in a hospital for about a year following my deployment. And then laying in that hospital bed for so long, and then transitioning to a wheelchair, and then transitioning to prosthetics and learning how to walk, that was just, it was just a different scenario. It was a different life, honestly, because at that point it had been up to, a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years after my deployment. Everybody else that I deployed with was back living their normal life. So it was definitely a different situation when it came to my life coming back and my transition coming back to civilian life. If I could go back in time to my deployment, I wouldn't change anything. I would be blown up a million times, knowing that I still was able to allow others to come home safe, that my battle boys didn't have to experience the pain and agony that I had to, and knowing that God got me through it all. So I wouldn't change a thing ever if I even had the opportunity. I like to encourage people to try to find the good in their situation that may seem like in the darkest days of their life and stuff like that, because there is always good just around the corner. And I like to tell people, for example, I lost both of my legs to a 200-pound IED, but that guy used to be 5'6", now 5'7" in prosthetics. So if I can find the silver lining to this very horrible, tragic event, then what's stopping them from doing the same thing?